The 1099 DIV has several boxes that may contain information. Those that you will see most commonly are ordinary dividends, qualified dividends, and capital gain distributions. Occasionally, but rarely, you may see non-taxable distributions and liquidation distributions. The likelihood is that you'll never see anything in the other boxes, so we'll ignore them for now. By far, ordinary dividends are the most common and will appear on most of the 1099 DIVs that you work with. Certain ordinary dividends beginning after 2002 are qualified dividends and reported in a separate box on the 1099 DIV. They are potentially subject to lower preferred tax rates. Qualification is dependent upon who issued the shares, the type of dividend they are, and whether they met a holding period. The corporation issuing the 1099 DIV makes this distinction easy because they will determine if the dividends are qualified or not, in which case you won't have to make that call. However, when calculating the tax, you may have to consider these dividends, so we will address them on the session relating to tax calculation. Many of your clients will be investors in mutual funds. A mutual fund is a collection of stocks from a number of different companies in a common industry or growth mode. Their hope is to diversify sufficiently so that the growth in the value of some stocks will more than offset the loss in others. Capital gains distributions may be part of dividends from mutual funds and recorded on Schedule D. Capital gains distributions are always considered a long-term distribution, which means that they, like qualified dividends, may be subject to a reduced income tax rate. Each year, these mutual funds will send your client a 1099 DIV showing what has happened to the value of their investment, including any gains or losses experienced. In most cases, they will show ordinary dividends, but on occasion, some of the other boxes may have numbers in them. For instance, if they receive a non-taxable distribution on their 1099 DIV, it is considered a return of principal and not taxable. It actually reduces their investment in the fund. This will become important when they sell their ownership, as it may increase their gain or decrease their loss. For example, Ellen invested $10,000 into a mutual fund, and the next year she receives a 1099 DIV containing a non-taxable distribution of $3,000. This will not affect her taxes this year, but serve to lower her investment, so now she only has $7,000 invested in the mutual fund. However, if the next year she sells her shares for $7,500, she will report a $500 capital gain in that year. Do not confuse this with liquidating dividends, which result when a corporation is closing their doors. If the dividend is more than your investment, the balance is taxable as a capital gain. Therefore, if your client paid $10,000 for the stock of a corporation and received a liquidating dividend of $12,000, they had a gain of $2,000 that is taxable as a capital gain. We'll discuss how to report capital gains and losses later. So, to recap, the 1099 DIV is what shows the dividends, long-term capital gains, and short-term capital gains, among other things. There's a copy of a 1099 DIV in your workbook, and I suggest that you become familiar with it. Although the look of the form your client receives may be different from the one shown in the book, just look for the title 1099 DIV somewhere on the paper, and it will have the different categories that line up with the one in the book.